Karen insisted that the public park was her private event space for her daughter's birthday and tried to kick everyone else out. 28F, never thought I'd have one of those legendary Karen encounters that you read about online, but here we are. This happened yesterday at Riverside Park, a beautiful public green space in my city that sits along the waterfront. I'm still processing the absolute audacity of what transpired, so bear with me as I recount this bizarre Sunday afternoon. For context, I'm a landscape photographer, and spring is my favorite season to shoot. The park has this stunning grove of cherry blossom trees that bloom for maybe 2 weeks each year, and yesterday was supposed to be peak bloom. I'd been monitoring the weather and bloom reports obsessively, waiting for that perfect combination of blue sky, soft light, and full blossoms. I arrived at the park around 2 p.m. with my camera gear, my boyfriend Jake, 29M, and our Australian Shepherd mix, Cosmo. The park was moderately busy, typical for a gorgeous Sunday afternoon, with families picnicking, couples walking, kids playing, and several other photographers taking advantage of the cherry blossoms. The park covers about 15 acres with multiple pavilions, playgrounds, walking paths, and plenty of open green space. We found a nice spot under the cherry trees near the Western Pavilion. I set up my tripod while Jake threw a frisbee for Cosmo, who was living his best life. I was about 20 minutes into shooting, getting some really gorgeous shots of the blossoms backlit by the afternoon sun, when I noticed unusual activity near the pavilion. A woman, mid-40s, designer athleisure wear, the kind of purposeful stride that immediately signals, "I'm about to make something my problem," was approaching various park visitors with what appeared to be increasing agitation. She'd speak to people briefly, gesture emphatically, and then move on to the next group when they didn't respond the way she wanted. I didn't think much of it until she headed directly toward us. "Excuse me," she said, not actually waiting for us to acknowledge her before continuing. "I'm going to need you to pack up your things and move to a different area of the park." I looked up from my camera, confused. "I'm sorry, what?" "This entire section," she gestured broadly to encompass basically everything from the pavilion to the cherry blossom grove and the shoreline beyond, "is reserved for a private event. You need to relocate." Jake stopped mid-frisbee throw. "Reserved? This is a public park." The woman, let's call her Karen, sighed dramatically, as if we were being deliberately obtuse. "Yes, I'm aware it's a public park, but I've reserved this space for my daughter's birthday party. It starts in an hour, and I need this area cleared." I glanced around at the dozen or so other groups of people enjoying the space she was claiming. How exactly does one reserve a section of a public park? "I have a permit," she said, pulling out her phone and scrolling through with the confidence of someone who believes bureaucracy is their superpower. "A permit for what, exactly?" Jake asked, genuinely curious now. Karen showed us her phone screen, which displayed an email confirmation. I leaned in to read it. She had indeed reserved the Western Pavilion for a private party from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. The reservation fee was $75. "Okay," I said slowly, "but the pavilion is over there." "We're not in the pavilion. The reservation includes the surrounding area," Karen insisted, "for setup and activities." I've actually photographed events at this park before, so I was somewhat familiar with the permit system. I don't think that's how it works. The pavilion reservation is just for the covered structure itself. The rest of the park remains public space. Karen's expression shifted from authoritative to irritated. "Listen, I don't have time to debate park regulations with you. I'm paying for this space, which means I need it cleared. There are plenty of other areas of the park you can use." "We're actually specifically here for the cherry blossoms," I explained, gesturing to the grove we were under. "They're only in bloom for a short time." "Well, so is my daughter's 7th birthday," Karen shot back. "She only turned 7 once, and I've planned this party for months. These trees are part of the aesthetic I promised." The entitlement was almost impressive in its scope. She wasn't just claiming the pavilion. She was trying to reserve the natural landscape features of a public park because they matched her party theme. Jake, ever the peacemaker, tried a diplomatic approach. "Look, we're not in your pavilion, and we're not going to interfere with your party. There's plenty of room for everyone." "You don't understand," Karen said, her voice taking on that particular quality of someone who's about to explain why their needs supersede everyone else's. "I have a photographer coming. A professional photographer who I'm paying $800 for 2 hours. Your presence ruins the backdrop. I need clear, unobstructed shots of my daughter's party, not random strangers photobombing the memories. I couldn't help myself. I am a professional photographer. And I hate to break it to you, but public parks mean public in the background. That's literally how public spaces work. Are you saying you refuse to move? Karen asked, her volume increasing. I'm saying we have as much right to be here as you do. I replied calmly. We're not in your pavilion. We're not going to interfere with your party. But we're not leaving a public space because you want exclusive access to cherry blossoms. Karen stared at me for a long moment, clearly recalculating her strategy. Then she turned and marched back toward the pavilion, phone already pressed to her ear. Jake and I exchanged glances. Well, that was weird, he said. She's definitely calling someone to complain, I predicted. Probably the Park Services office. I went back to my photography, though I'll admit I was now slightly on edge, wondering what Karen's next move would be. About 15 minutes later, I got my answer. A park ranger truck pulled up near the pavilion. A tired-looking man in his 50s emerged and began speaking with Karen, who was gesticulating wildly. Even from a distance, I could see her pointing at various groups around the area, including us. The ranger spent about 5 minutes listening to Karen's animated presentation, occasionally glancing at the paper she kept thrusting at him, presumably her pavilion reservation. Finally, he nodded and began making his way through the park, stopping at each group Karen had indicated. When he reached us, he looked apologetic before he even spoke. Afternoon, folks, he said. I'm Ranger Martinez. I understand you're aware there's a private event here today. We're aware someone reserved the pavilion, Jake clarified. We're not in the pavilion. Ranger Martinez nodded.
Right.
So, here's the situation. The woman over there seems to believe her pavilion reservation entitles her to exclusive use of the surrounding area. I've tried explaining that's not how it works, but she's insisting I remove everyone from this section of the park. Can she do that? I asked. No, he said flatly. The pavilion reservation covers the structure only. The rest of the park remains public space. I'm just making rounds to let people know there's going to be a party, in case anyone wants to relocate for peace and quiet. But you're under no obligation to move. We're fine staying here, I told him. We're specifically here for the cherry blossoms, and we'll stay out of their party's way. Ranger Martinez smiled wearily. That's what I figured most people would say. Fair warning. She's not taking this well. He wasn't kidding. After he finished his rounds, with apparently every single person choosing to remain in their chosen spots, Karen stormed over to our area again, this time with reinforcements, a man I assumed was her husband, looking deeply uncomfortable, and another woman in her 30s wearing a party coordinator t-shirt. This is completely unacceptable, Karen announced to Ranger Martinez, who had followed her over with the resigned air of someone who knew his afternoon was about to get much longer. I paid for this space. I expect it to be private. Ma'am, as I've explained, you paid for the pavilion structure. The website said, perfect for outdoor celebrations with scenic backdrops. Karen interrupted, reading from her phone. How am I supposed to have a scenic backdrop if it's crowded with random people? The scenic backdrop is the natural landscape, Ranger Martinez explained with impressive patience. That's available for everyone to enjoy. That's what makes it scenic. The party coordinator jumped in, trying a different tactic. Perhaps we could reach a compromise? If these folks could just move during the cake cutting and photograph sessions, maybe 30 minutes total, that would give us the clean background shots the client is paying for. I'm in the middle of a photo shoot, I said, gesturing to my camera setup. I have limited time with optimal lighting conditions. I'm not pausing my work because someone else wants exclusive access to public cherry blossoms. Karen turned to her husband. David, do something. You said this would be perfect. You said we'd have the space we needed. David, who looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else, cleared his throat. Honey, maybe it's fine if there are other people around. Lily won't even notice. Of course she'll notice. Everyone will notice. The photos will be ruined. Karen's voice was climbing toward hysteria. I've spent $3,000 on this party. $3,000. The least these people could do is show some courtesy and move for an hour. An hour? I repeated. You said 30 minutes. Well, with setup and breakdown, the party coordinator began. No, Jake said firmly. We're not moving. You're welcome to have your party in the pavilion you reserved. You're welcome to take photos anywhere in the public park. But you don't get to dictate who else uses public space. Karen's face was turning an alarming shade of red. This is harassment. You're deliberately trying to ruin my daughter's birthday. Ma'am, Ranger Martinez interjected, his patience clearly wearing thin. These folks have every right to be here. If you continue to harass other park visitors, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Ask me to leave? I have a reservation. A reservation that doesn't include the right to exclude others from public areas, he said firmly. Now, I suggest you focus on setting up your party in the pavilion you've rented and let everyone else enjoy the park peacefully. Karen looked like she might spontaneously combust.
Fine.
But when my lawyer contacts the parks department about this, don't say I didn't warn you. She spun on her heel and marched back toward the pavilion, her husband and the party coordinator hurrying after her. Ranger Martinez turned to us. Sorry about that. Some people think money entitles them to anything. No worries, I said. Thanks for backing us up. Just doing my job, he replied. Though between you and me, I give it 20 minutes before she causes another scene. He was off by 10 minutes. The party got underway right at 3 p.m. I have to give Karen credit. Despite her terrible attitude, she had organized an elaborate setup. The pavilion was decorated with pink and gold balloons. There were multiple tables laden with food, a face painting station, and even a small petting zoo in a penned area. A group of about 30 kids and their parents began arriving, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe Karen would be too busy hosting to continue her crusade against public space users. I was wrong. I first noticed something was off when I saw Karen speaking intensely to the professional photographer she'd hired, a woman in her late 20s with multiple camera bodies strapped across her chest. Karen kept pointing toward our area, and the photographer kept shaking her head. Their conversation grew more animated until finally, the photographer began packing up her gear. 5 minutes later, I watched this photographer walk over to her car, load her equipment, and drive away. Karen had apparently fired her photographer rather than accept that public parks contain other people. The party coordinator seemed to be having an intense phone conversation, presumably trying to find a replacement photographer. Meanwhile, Karen grabbed her own phone and started taking pictures of the party herself, but she kept angling the camera to try to avoid getting any other park visitors in the background, which resulted in increasingly awkward compositions. At one point, she tried to organize the children for a group photo in front of the cherry blossoms, which meant bringing them closer to where we were. She spent 5 minutes arranging kids, then would look up, see us in the background, and rearrange everyone at a different angle. After the third rearrangement, one of the kids asked loudly, "Mom, why does that lady keep moving us?" I liked the first spot better. Several parents were starting to look annoyed, not at us, but at Karen's increasingly erratic behavior. The birthday girl herself, a sweet-looking kid in a fancy dress, seemed oblivious to the drama, happily playing with her friends. Then came the cake-cutting ceremony, which is when things really escalated. Karen had ordered an enormous 3-tier custom cake decorated to match the cherry blossom theme. I'll admit, it was stunning. She assembled all the guests around a table positioned for maximum cherry blossom backdrop and began leading everyone in singing "Happy Birthday." Right at the moment when everyone was singing, Cosmo, who had been peacefully napping under a tree, suddenly woke up and decided to bark. Not at the party, just at a squirrel that had ventured too close. But the timing made it sound like he was barking directly at the song. Several kids at the party thought this was hilarious and started laughing and pointing at Cosmo. The birthday girl was delighted and began waving at him. Cosmo, being the friendly dog he is, took this as an invitation and started pulling toward the party, tail wagging enthusiastically. Jake quickly secured Cosmo's leash, keeping him in our area, but the damage was done. The moment was ruined by dog barking, and you could see something snap in Karen. She marched over to us with a fury I hadn't yet witnessed. "Your dog is disrupting my daughter's party." "He barked once at a squirrel," Jake said calmly. "He's allowed to be here. It's a dog-friendly park. He needs to leave. Now." "No," I said simply. "I will call animal control and report you for having a vicious animal in a public space with children." I actually laughed at this. He wagged his tail and barked at a squirrel. Good luck with that. Ranger Martinez, who had been monitoring the situation from his truck, walked over. "Ma'am, we've been through this. The dog is on a leash, well-behaved, and not causing any problems. You need to return to your party." "His barking ruined my daughter's cake cutting." "Dogs bark," Ranger Martinez said with the tone of someone explaining basic reality to a toddler. "That's what dogs do, especially in parks. If you wanted a completely controlled environment, you should have rented a private venue." "I did rent a private venue," Karen shrieked. "I rented this venue." "You rented a pavilion in a public park," he corrected. "And I'm running out of patience. This is your final warning. Stop harassing other park visitors, or I will revoke your pavilion reservation and ask you to leave." This threat seemed to finally penetrate Karen's rage bubble. She fell silent for a moment, breathing heavily, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she turned and walked back to her party without another word. But the afternoon wasn't over yet. About 30 minutes later, while I was photographing a particularly beautiful cluster of blossoms, I noticed the party coordinator approaching. Unlike Karen, she seemed genuinely apologetic. "Hi," she said quietly. "I just wanted to apologize for all the drama. This is not how I usually run events." "It's not your fault," I assured her. "You're just trying to do your job." She sighed. "Between you and me, I'm never working with this client again. She's been a nightmare from day one. She's changed the party plan 14 times, insisted on decorations that violated park rules, and now this." She gestured vaguely at the whole situation. "The worst part is, her daughter doesn't even seem to care about any of it. The kid's having a great time." I glanced over at the party. She was right. The birthday girl was laughing and playing with her friends, completely oblivious to her mother's meltdown over public space boundaries. "I actually wanted to ask you something," the coordinator continued. "I saw your camera setup. Are you a professional photographer?" "I am," I confirmed. "Would you be willing to take some photos of the party?" The mother fired her photographer, and I've been trying to find a replacement for the last hour with no luck. Everyone's already booked on a Sunday afternoon. I know it's a huge ask, especially after how she's treated you, but I feel terrible for the kid. She deserves to have professional photos of her party. It was a wild request, and my first instinct was to laugh and say absolutely not. But then I looked at the party again, at the little girl who had no idea her mother was systematically making enemies of everyone around her, who just wanted to celebrate her birthday with her friends. "I'll do it," I said. "But I have conditions." "Name them." 1. Karen doesn't get to direct me at all. I'll take the photos I think are best. 2. I'm charging my standard rate, $300 for the hour. 3. Payment up front before I take a single shot. 4. If she's rude to me even once, I walk away, no refund. The coordinator agreed immediately and went to discuss it with Karen. I could see the conversation from across the lawn. Karen's initial indignation, the coordinator's firm stance, and finally Karen's reluctant acceptance, probably realizing she had no other options. 10 minutes later, after Karen had transferred $300 to my Venmo, I made her add $15 extra to cover the processing fee, just because I found myself photographing the very party that the host had spent the last 2 hours trying to banish me from. The irony was not lost on anyone. To Karen's credit, and this might be the only credit I give her, she kept her distance and let me work. I focused on capturing genuine moments, kids laughing, the birthday girl's expression when she saw her cake, friends playing games. I even got some beautiful shots with the cherry blossoms in the background, naturally incorporating other park visitors in a way that made the photos feel authentic and lively rather than sterile and staged. The birthday girl was a natural in front of the camera, completely unself-conscious and joyful. At one point, she noticed Cosmo and asked if she could meet him. With her father's permission, he seemed much more reasonable than his wife. I brought Cosmo over. The photo of her giggling while Cosmo licked her face ended up being my favorite shot of the day. When my contracted hour was up, I packed my gear and prepared to leave. The party coordinator thanked me profusely, and several parents complimented the photos they'd seen me taking. The birthday girl gave Cosmo one more pat and thanked me for the pictures. Karen stood to the side, arms crossed, wearing an expression that suggested thanking me would physically pain her. As we walked past, she managed a tight, "The photos better be good." "They will be," I assured her, "despite your best efforts to prevent them from existing at all." We left the park as the sun was beginning to set, the cherry blossoms glowing pink in the golden light. Jake was quiet for a moment before saying, "Did that really just happen? Did you really end up photographing the party of the woman who tried to kick us out of a public park?" "Life is weird," I agreed. That evening, I culled through the photos from both my personal shoot and the party. I sent Karen 50 edited images, all of them technically excellent, many of them genuinely beautiful. I included several of the cherry blossom shots, complete with other park visitors visible in the background, because that's reality, and pretending otherwise is ridiculous. I didn't hear from Karen, but the party coordinator sent me a message. "Client is satisfied with photos. Thank you for saving the day." Also, between us, she didn't notice that other people are in the backgrounds of most shots. Face with tears of joy. Update 1. The review and the response. I honestly thought that would be the end of the Karen saga. I'd gotten paid, delivered quality work, and moved on with my life. But this is apparently a story that keeps on giving. 3 days after the party, I received a notification that someone had left me a review on my photography business page. With a sense of dread, I opened it. 1 star. Hired this photographer last minute for my daughter's party. While technically competent, she showed no respect for my event or my vision. Refused to follow directions about composition, and insisted on including random strangers in the background of photos despite my explicit instructions for clean shots. Very unprofessional attitude. Would not recommend. I stared at my phone in disbelief. The audacity was actually impressive. This woman had spent 2 hours trying to force me out of a public park, reluctantly hired me only after firing her original photographer, and was now leaving a negative review because I documented reality. I spent about an hour crafting a professional response, which I'll admit went through several very unprofessional drafts first. My final response. Thank you for your feedback. To clarify for future clients reading this review, I was hired under emergency circumstances after the client's original photographer left. The event took place in a public park where, as explained multiple times to the client, other visitors have equal right to enjoy the space. The random strangers mentioned in the review were other park visitors lawfully enjoying public space, which cannot be excluded from photos taken in public areas. All images delivered met professional standards and were taken within the scope of our agreed-upon contract. I stand by my work and my professionalism. Within hours, other people began responding to Karen's review. Several were clearly parents who had attended the party. I was at this party. This photographer was hired last minute because the original photographer quit after the host's unreasonable demands. The photos were beautiful, and this woman was nothing but professional despite difficult circumstances. My daughter attended this party. The photographer was great with kids and captured wonderful moments. The host spent more time complaining about other people using the public park than actually enjoying her daughter's party. But my favorite response came from Ranger Martinez himself. I'm the park ranger who was present at this event. This photographer and her partner were lawfully enjoying public park space before the event began. They were under no obligation to move or to accommodate the host's demands for exclusive access to public areas. The photographer showed remarkable professionalism throughout, including agreeing to provide photography services after the host's original photographer left. The negative review is unwarranted. Karen's review quickly became the least credible thing on my page, buried under a wave of support. My business page actually got a boost from the drama. Several people reached out for bookings specifically because they'd read the review thread and appreciated how I handled an entitled client. But Karen wasn't done yet. 2 days after the review debacle, I received an email to my business address. The subject line was urgent: copyright infringement. In the email, Karen demanded that I remove all photos from the party from my devices and cease any and all use of images containing my daughter. She claimed that since she'd hired me, she owned the copyright to all images, and any use by me constituted theft. This was so legally backwards that I actually had to sit down. For those unfamiliar with photography copyright law, the photographer owns the copyright to images they create, unless there's a specific contract stating otherwise. My standard contract, which Karen had digitally signed before I took a single photo, explicitly stated that I retained copyright and could use images for my portfolio and marketing purposes, while she received a license to use the images for personal use. I forwarded the email to my lawyer friend, Sophie, who specializes in intellectual property law. She called me 20 minutes later, laughing. "This is the most confidently incorrect legal threat I've seen this month," she said. "Want me to respond? I'll do it for free just for the entertainment value." Sophie sent a brief but professionally devastating response explaining copyright law, referencing the signed contract, and politely suggesting that any further baseless legal threats could constitute harassment. She CC'd me on the email, and I never heard from Karen again on the copyright issue. Update 2, 6 months later. I'm adding this update because the universe apparently loves irony even more than I realized. 6 months after the cherry blossom incident, I was booked to photograph a wedding at, you guessed it, the same park. Different pavilion, different cherry blossom grove, since the blooms were long gone, but the same riverside park. The wedding was beautiful, a small, intimate ceremony with about 40 guests. The bride and groom were laid back and wonderful to work with, exactly the kind of clients I love. During the cocktail hour, while guests were mingling, I was taking candid shots when I heard a familiar voice. "You've got to be kidding me." I turned to find Karen standing with what appeared to be a group of wedding guests, staring at me with an expression of pure disbelief. "Hello," I said neutrally, determined to remain professional. "You're photographing this wedding?" she asked, as if I had somehow orchestrated this cosmic coincidence purely to inconvenience her. "I am," I confirmed. "Are you a guest?" "The groom is my nephew," she said, her tone suggesting this somehow gave her authority over my presence. "Does he know about your history of unprofessional behavior?" Before I could respond, the groom himself, a genuinely nice guy named Marcus, walked over. "Aunt Karen, I see you've met our photographer. Isn't she great? Her portfolio was amazing." Karen's face went through several interesting expressions as she tried to figure out how to explain our history without revealing her own behavior. "We've met before," she finally said. "Oh, that's wonderful," Marcus said, completely missing the tension. Small world. One of the other wedding guests, the maid of honor, as I later learned, had been watching this interaction with poorly concealed amusement. After Karen walked away, she approached me. "That was Karen," she said, as if the name itself was explanation enough. "I'm aware," I replied. "I'm Emily, the bride's best friend. And I have to tell you, we almost didn't invite her. She's the family member everyone tolerates but nobody actually likes." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. She tried to insist the bride change her wedding colors to something more sophisticated and suggested the guest list was too small to be respectable. The bride told her if she had one more opinion about someone else's wedding, she'd be uninvited. I couldn't help but smile. That tracks with my experience of her. Emily grinned. "Oh, I know all about your experience. The whole family knows. Her husband David is my uncle, and he told everyone about the park incident. It's become a family legend. Remember when Karen tried to kick people out of a public park? Comes up at every gathering." This was extremely satisfying information. The wedding proceeded beautifully, and I got some stunning shots as the sun set over the river. Karen kept her distance, though I occasionally caught her watching me work with an expression that suggested she was trying to find something to criticize and coming up empty. During the reception, the bride and groom did a thank you round where they personally greeted each table of guests. When they got to Karen's table, I was nearby, capturing candid moments. I overheard the bride say, "And thank you for coming, despite the distance. We know it was a long drive." Karen, never one to miss an opportunity, replied, "Well, we almost didn't make it. The park's public nature is so chaotic. I worry about the photos with random people wandering through the background." The bride laughed. "Oh, that's part of what I love about this venue. It feels alive and real, not like a sterile studio. Plus, our photographer is amazing at working with the environment." She gestured to me. She actually specializes in natural, candid shots that incorporate the surroundings. I caught the moment Karen realized she'd walked directly into praising my work, and her face was absolutely priceless. I may or may not have taken a photo of that exact expression. I definitely did. It's one of my favorites from the day. The reception ended without incident, and as I was packing up my equipment, Marcus and his new wife came over to thank me. "The photos are going to be incredible," the bride said. "I can't wait to see them." "One question," Marcus added. "My Aunt Karen mentioned you two had met before? She was kind of weird about it, but wouldn't explain." I smiled diplomatically. "We had a previous encounter at this park. Let's just say we have different views on how public spaces work." Marcus laughed. "That is the most tactful description of anything involving Aunt Karen I've ever heard. Whatever happened, I apologize on behalf of the family. She's a lot." "She's definitely memorable," I agreed. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the strange journey this story had taken. From being harassed in a public park, to reluctantly photographing the party of my harasser, to being hired independently for a wedding where she happened to be a guest, it was the kind of circular narrative that seemed too perfect to be real. But the best part came 2 weeks later, when I delivered the wedding photos. Marcus and his wife loved them. They posted several on social media, tagged me, and left a glowing review on my business page. Several of their wedding guests reached out to book me for their own events. And Karen? She was visible in exactly 3 photos, background shots where she happened to be in the frame. Not featured, not prominent, just there. Exactly like all those other random people in public spaces that she'd been so concerned about. I like to think there's a lesson in there somewhere about public spaces, entitlement, and the inevitable karma of trying to control things that were never yours to control in the first place. Final update. The message. I truly didn't expect to add another update, but something happened last week that felt like the final chapter this story needed. I received a friend request on social media from Melissa Mitchell, Karen's daughter, the 7th birthday girl from the original incident. She was now turning 8, and her profile picture showed a smiling kid who looked significantly happier than she had at her 7th birthday party. Along with the friend request was a message. "Hi. You probably don't remember me, but you took pictures at my birthday party last year at the park, the one where my mom was really mean to you and everyone else. I'm not supposed to be on social media yet, but my dad helps me use his account sometimes. I wanted to say thank you for the pictures, especially the one with your dog. It's my favorite picture for my whole birthday. Also, my dad says I should tell you that my mom is working on herself and goes to therapy now. She's getting better at not being so mean to people. Dad says what happened at my party was a wake-up call." I don't really know what that means, but I think it's good. Anyway, thanks for being nice to me even when my mom wasn't nice to you. Your dog is the best. Melissa. I sat with that message for a long time. In all the frustration and absurdity of the original incident, I'd almost forgotten there was a kid at the center of it all. A kid who just wanted to celebrate her birthday and pet a dog. I wrote back, "Hi Melissa. I absolutely remember you, and I'm so glad you liked the photos, especially the one with Cosmo. He liked you too. You're welcome to follow my page if your dad says it's okay. I post lots of pictures of dogs and nature. Happy early 8th birthday. Sarah." David Mitchell sent me a separate message later that day. "Hi Sarah. This is David, Karen's husband. Melissa is thrilled that you responded. I wanted to reach out personally to apologize, on behalf of my wife and myself, for the incident last year. You handled everything with far more grace than we deserved. The whole situation was a wake-up call for Karen. She's been in therapy, working on understanding why she acts the way she does and learning healthier ways to handle stress and disappointment. She's not perfect, it's a process, but she's genuinely trying. I know an apology doesn't undo what happened, but for what it's worth, we're both sorry. And thank you for being kind to Melissa. That photo with your dog is framed in her bedroom. Best, David. I appreciated the message, though I noted that Karen hadn't reached out herself. But you know what? That was okay. People grow at their own pace, and therapy is hard work. If Karen was genuinely trying to be better, that was more important than whether she apologized to me personally. The real winner in this whole saga was Melissa, a kid who got a memorable birthday party for better and worse, whose parents were working to be better, and who got a pet, a very good dog. And Cosmo? He remains blissfully unaware that he's the hero of this entire story. TLDR. Karen tried to kick everyone out of a public park because she rented a pavilion for her daughter's birthday party and believed that entitled her to exclusive use of the surrounding public space, including the cherry blossom trees. After harassing multiple park visitors, including me and my boyfriend, and firing her photographer for refusing to work under impossible conditions, she reluctantly hired me, one of the people she'd tried to kick out, to photograph the party. 6 months later, she turned up as a guest at a wedding I was photographing at the same park. The daughter later reached out to thank me for the photos, especially the one with my dog, and revealed that the incident had been a wake-up call that prompted her mother to seek therapy.